Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of We Witness, where we here at Nexstar Media dig into the archives that span the country. For those that don't know Nexstar Media, the name, you might know a local station, such as KRON 4 in San Francisco, owned by Nexstar, which really means we've been around for a bit, and we've been around all over the place. A lot of those big national stories begin as local stories, and what we'd like to do on this show is take the local stories that became national in history and revisit those not only through the video we captured while covering the event, but by talking to some of the people who truly witnessed it. I mentioned San Francisco on today's episode. We are going back to 1989 to what at the time was a major earthquake, perhaps still one of the biggest earthquakes felt in a major metro area. And for those that weren't alive or have a memory of it at the time, let us set the scene, if you will, with what that day was setting up to be.
October 17th, 1989, started out like any other day in Northern California. By afternoon, it was hot and hazy, the kind of balmy day the old-timers call earthquake weather. But even if it was unseasonably warm, nobody was thinking about the weather. All we were talking about was baseball. We were a divided community that Tuesday afternoon, taking sides for our Battle of the Bay, the first World Series ever played between the San Francisco Giants and the Oakland A's.
There were a few tickets available for the game earlier this morning, 21 to be exact.
The biggest news story that afternoon was how to get your hands on some tickets for that night's Game 3. By 5, if you weren't at Candlestick, you were watching it on television. By 5:02, over 30 million people tuned in. At 5:03, we were watching highlights from Game 2, about to see the replay of Dave Parker's run-scoring double off the right field wall at the Coliseum. At 5:04, the World Series was the furthest thing from our minds.
At second base, so the Oakland A's take.
Hey, what, we're having an earthquake.
Oh my God, we're having an earthquake. Wait a minute. Hold on. Can you feel that? There go the lights.
There you have it, a little bit of video from that day. We are going to show so much more video of what happened and how people reacted, how the community responded. And in addition to the video, we actually have a now anchor who was a reporter that was there joining us from KRON 4, Catherine Heenan. And let me bring you in, Catherine. Thank you so much for taking the time to revisit what was a major event. I'm sure it's still talked about in some sense, and I don't know if there's still even lingering impacts in the community. But I wanted to begin with your own personal story. You know, a lot of people probably hear, oh, you were working at KRON 4 at the time. You were probably in San Francisco for the earthquake. Yours is a little bit different, but certainly has its own story to it. So fill us in. Where were you when that earthquake struck?
Yeah, not only was I not in San Francisco, I didn't feel it, for God's sake. My mother and father, my little Irish parents, were visiting. I was chauffeuring my mother from Sacramento and casually turned on the radio as we were driving. I wanted to check on the World Series game. That's how I found out, believe it or not. I found out on the radio. My father was alone in my apartment in Santa Clara, and we were, I'm chuckling now, but we were frantic. You know, you couldn't really reach people. You couldn't call people. We didn't know if he was okay, had he been injured. So it was very, very stressful. So I was on my way back to the Bay Area and just hustling to make sure my dad was okay. That was my first thought. And you were working at KRON 4 at the time. So you're on this journey now to return to the area, find out if your dad is okay. I have to imagine part of your mind is turning to the work, though, as well as what's going to be asked of you when you get back. Oh, absolutely. And it wasn't immediately clear, maybe in the first minutes, but a lot of the attention, understandably, was on Oakland, was on San Francisco because of damage to freeways and bridges and the World Series. So everything was, the focus was there. It turns out the epicenter was, in fact, in the South Bay. It was in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And that was sort of part of my turf as a reporter. I worked the South Bay. So I just was wondering, okay, where do I go first? Will it be Santa Cruz, Gilroy. We really didn't know what was happening in those communities. And for a while, nobody did.
Yeah. I mean, think about that. 1989, for those that were alive, no, it was a different time technologically. So getting information out, you mentioned you found out just because you happened to turn on the radio, then had no way to get a hold of your dad. And even if technology was as it is today, that earthquake knocked out power. I'm sure cell phone towers would have been down if they had existed.
No, they would have been. My father, by the way, was all right. He was sitting in my little dark apartment. The television had been flown, went flying across the room. All my books and china, and God bless him, he was kind of quietly trying to tidy up so we wouldn't be, so my mother and I would not be as shocked when we came in. It was, he quietly acknowledged later that he kind of thought, all right, this is it, because it just didn't stop. He said, this is it.
And a couple of factoids about it I pulled up. So October 17th, 1989, 504 local, as we heard in the intro story. You mentioned where it was centered. So specifically 10 miles northeast of Santa Cruz along the San Andreas fault system, a fault name many people know across the world. It was ended up being named the Loma Prieta earthquake after the Loma Prieta peak in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So near the epicenter, and it was a 6.9 magnitude. There were a couple of foreshocks. I don't know if you had experienced any of those. June 1988, August 1989. Certainly now we know they were foreshocks. But leading into it, there were a couple of signs that something big was on the way.
Yeah, and if people didn't know much about the San Andreas fault, boy, they sure did after that. And it was one of those extraordinary things where you almost didn't believe it was happening, even as you were working through it and hustling to do stories. It was almost unbelievable.
And
go ahead.
No, please.
No, I was just going to say I got sent to Watsonville. We had no idea what was going on there. Again, the communications were basically gone. And that was just about 9 miles south of the epicenter. What I saw was frightened people sitting in their front yards. People had dragged like couches and chairs out into the alley. Either homes were damaged, or even in cases where they were okay, people were absolutely terrified and would not go back inside, which turned into a thing that lasted for weeks and months in some cases.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more. I have one of your stories from 1989 a little later in this program. I want to turn back to the moment it happened, though, because we have a video now that, as you mentioned, in the moment, you don't know what's going on. But after the fact, certainly years later, as things get compiled and there's a look back that happens, KRON 4 was able to take all of that material and turn it into a very well compiled, essentially video diary of that initial moment, of the 5 days that followed. And so that's what we've pulled a lot of this video from. So for those that, again, haven't seen any of this before, I'm going to warn you, this next minute and a half is not only impactful, but does have a couple of video shots that could be disturbing to some. So that is the warning. But nonetheless, this is scenes, or this consists of scenes from day one, including the earthquake moment itself.
The Oakland take. I'll tell you what, we haven't heard of. Oh my God, he says one of the bridges, they didn't say which one collapsed.
Gosh!
It is now 5:15, Tuesday, 17th of October, 1989.
Next thing I knew, I heard boom!
There's a gas leak. Let's go. Turn around and go that way.
Gas leak!
Right now we have a major fire burning in San Francisco's Marina District. It started at the northeast corner of Beach End to Visadero Streets. A building there collapsed and burst into flames.
We need food, we need water. We don't have any toilet facilities. some cases, people are out there directing traffic.
It's just the way we feel about the city. It's ours.
So that's a look back again at that first day in 1989. Catherine, I know you've probably seen these images many times. What is it like to see them again and sort of relive the coverage that you took part in the days following?
Oh, it just brings back 1989. And part of the memories are the incredible way people ran from their homes and to help. I mean, not just people running because of what had happened, running to help. The firefighters, the police were on the scene right away, but so were neighbors and people coming together to help each other and working. And in the marina, for example, I knew a guy who lived there, and he said just got out, started picking up cement, picking up rocks. People were incredible in how they rushed to help each other, Chip, and that's one of the great things to remember about this.
That's something I noticed too in looking back at the video, that so many of the rescuers essentially were just people, were just neighbors. They weren't first responders. And I have to imagine first responders by themselves were quite overwhelmed as it was. Collapsed buildings, freeways, bridges, buildings on fire. I mean, if it weren't for the community stepping up, so much more would have been lost.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at that video, and a lot of those people are not first responders.
Right.
You're right. They're just people who rushed out of stores, who had been shopping or working, left their homes, neighbors helping each other. We'll talk about it more a little later, but I was anchoring the day that, because nobody expected after 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days that anybody would be found alive in the collapsed Cypress Freeway. And Tom Sigvitz and I were anchoring the day they found Buck Helm, a guy who had been in his car 90 hours.
Wow.
And he was alive. It became a symbol. I do remember, because we took it live, rescuers cheering and, crying and applauding, because he kind of became a symbol of persistence and hope and survival. Ultimately, he didn't live very long, and we never really heard his story. He wasn't able to tell it. Like, how did he last? What was he doing those 4 days that kept him going?
Yeah,
but some amazing stories.
A few of the statistics related to injuries and deaths: more than 60 people died as a result of this earthquake. More than 3,700 were injured. There were also aftershocks. So the damage, obviously the major damage happened at the main quake, as it would be. But you talked about people afraid to go back into their homes. We're going to revisit that story where you covered that in Watsonville. And I believe in that same story, you talk about that gentleman being rescued 4 days later. But it was such a devastating moment in multiple areas, right? Yes, that epicenter was in the Santa Cruz mountains, but the whole Bay Area, I mean, so densely populated, and South Bay, as you guys have told me, so densely populated that there was hardly anyone in that community that was unaffected.
Yeah, and it's easy to forget, again, in those first hours and really the first couple days, people weren't getting a lot of information from some of the more rural areas in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Some of those areas are kind of out of touch at the best of times. So people did not know how bad it was, and it was pretty bad, and we didn't know. And so reporters, colleagues, and I were just sent to go find what we could find, and it didn't take long, unfortunately. So it's not as though they even knew exactly where to send us. Drive south, tell us what you see.
I have one more.
It was something. Go ahead.
One more clip that I wanted to play from the big special that you had all put together from the day one. Just you're noting how you're not sure what's happening where, and in the hindsight, they were able to put together sort of clips from around the area. So I just want to bring viewers in one last time to that day in 1989 before we take a break and then talk about recovery. So for those that this video has been shocking you, here's just a little bit more of this 1989 earthquake in the San Francisco area.
It's a building approximately 4 stories high. Brick building is a type 3 that collapsed because of the earthquake. There are right now maybe 5 cars that are covered with debris. Very possible, that there are victims under here. because of the time. This is the time that people, when it hit, people get off work.
6 in Townsend where bricks from a structure fell onto 3 cars with 5 people inside. None of the 5 people survived.
Somehow we're missing one.
And we got the one you pulled out into the line over there. That's 5.
That's 5.
So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
That's correct.
This is Megan in downtown San Francisco in the Union Square area. It was the only downtown building.
It looks like we have 5 patients that we're going to end up transporting. 5 patients, and we should be able to handle all of them. Okay, do you have a destination?
Don't be scared, Aunt Lisa's in there with you, all right?
I'll take good care of you.
All right, now we have a major fire burning in San Francisco's Marina District. It started at the northeast corner of Beach End to Visadero Streets. A building there collapsed and burst into flames as another building across the way from it on the northeast corner of Beach End to Visadero also collapsed. That was a 3-story building. It collapsed into about 3/4 of a story.
And we saw this go, and it just quietly collapsed. It was so bizarre. It was just like a quiet crunch. It just crunched down.
There's a gas leak. Let's go. Turn around and go that way.
I mean, I did not really know of this earthquake, to be perfectly honest, until we started talking about doing this episode of We Witness. So for me, seeing all this video for the first time is truly experiencing this event for the first time. And I don't know if you've seen me get emotional a couple of times, but I'm such an empath. Like, I feel what all these people are going through. Was it hard for you as a reporter to do your job while also seeing all of this take place?
In some ways, yes, but in other ways, there was this incredible, and not just me, there was this focus, like get out there and tell people what happened. And you were so focused on finding stories, and I always try to find areas that maybe would otherwise be a little overlooked, just getting people to talk. And yes, at times, at one point, a woman came up to me in Watsonville, and she had children with her, and she said, she asked me, when can I go back to my house? When will it be okay? And I always remember, when will it be okay? And really didn't know what to tell people. So yes, it was emotional, but everybody just kept going, Chip.
Well, we're going to take a quick break and begin to revisit some of the stories in Watsonville that you've been telling us about. So everyone stay tuned. When we come back, we'll hear a Catherine report from 1989 and a bit more about the recovery that started to take place just that next day. Welcome back to We Witnessed. I'm Chip Brewster. Catherine Heenan joining us from KRON 4 as we discuss the Loma Prieta earthquake from 1989. For the last almost 18 minutes, we've been watching video from that first day of devastation and how it really impacted that whole area. But Catherine, I want to spend what little time we have left together to talk about the recovery effort and really what happened long term. So I'm going to begin with it was sort of a look back that you did on some of the reporting that you had in Watsonville. And then you can tell us about not only the days that followed, but honestly, the weeks and years that followed. So let's take a look back.
Sure.
Now.
When we arrived in Watsonville the day after the earthquake, people had pulled couches into alleys. They'd set up tents and hauled out cooking supplies. Most people we talked to absolutely refused to stay indoors. They were too afraid of another earthquake.
It's bad for all of us. We're not used to this. We don't know what's going to happen.
The tents and parks would serve as home to families for weeks and months to come. Even families whose homes were stable said they wanted to stay outdoors. The National Guard eventually brought in supplies and better tents, but as the days wore on, some bringing rain, Even the children who had looked upon this as an adventure were growing weary. But then the Bay Area got a story of hope. I was anchoring the news the day 58-year-old Buck Helm was found alive in the wreckage of the collapsed Nimitz Freeway. People couldn't believe it. It had been more than 4 days since the quake.
Greatest rescue ever been involved in, man.
Helm became a symbol of survival, of not giving up hope. But about a month later, he died, becoming the 67th fatality of the Loma Prieta quake.
So there's that look back, Catherine. I mean, hearing your own voice from that time, seeing the images, you're talking about anchoring and seeing that rescue live. What was it like in those days and weeks and months that followed after he was pulled out, as the city and the area began to recover?
Well, even in the newsroom, people were exclaiming and shouting like somebody's alive. They found somebody. And I did go, and you're showing Watsonville. I was hustled off to Watsonville right away, near the epicenter, and a good example of what was happening outside the city in a way, the more rural areas, blue-collar working community. People just dragged their furniture, as I said in that story, into the alley, and sofas and chairs or front yard. Later, they began to go to parks and put together tents or whatever they had to just get out of their homes. There were a lot of aftershocks. There were, in fact, thousands of them, and some of them were pretty significant. So even as authorities began to gather in the houses that were okay, encouraging them to get off the parks and the yards and the streets, they would not go. They went from having, I think, hundreds of people to 25,000 people eventually in Watsonville.
Wow.
Were living in parks. And in some cases, that became home for months because they just really had nowhere else to go. I also remember the Watsonville Hospital. They did an incredible job. They got people out into the parking lot. Everybody doing what they could, and then people being brought in. Food supplies, volunteers there were so many of them, they almost didn't know what to do with them. People who had small planes began to fly supplies into Watsonville because it was still pretty hard to come and go for quite a while because of damaged roads and bridges. So Watsonville was a great example of a community that pulled itself together, wouldn't go back inside their houses, but helped each other. People were sort of babysitting each other's children, cooking for each other. At times it looked almost like community picnic, everybody helping each other.
And I'd pulled up some video while you were talking, just so everyone is aware, that some video from the second day after, where recovery was already underway. And by recovery, I mean identifying buildings that could not be saved. So they were demolishing those, clearing ones that people said, yes, we're safe. But because of the aftershocks, because of that experience, it didn't really matter. You're saying, Catherine, that people weren't going back in those homes for some time until they knew with certainty, or at least felt with certainty, that they would be safe in them.
Yeah, and that was true in other places too. We mentioning the marina, of course, you saw how many areas were just flattened in the marina. It was devastating. But even on the outer edges of that area, and homes that were okay or relatively okay, again, you had people that, and I can't blame them, would not go back into their houses. One of my co-anchors said his wife refused to go back in for a long time. He could not talk her into getting back into the house. People were afraid, but they were also very determined and busy, and they just kept going.
I found it interesting. So a few more stats just to put some more context with this as far as the recovery goes. So the Bay Bridge opened, it took a month, but it did open November 18th, 89. So almost exactly a month later. But Highway 880 took until fall of 1998. So nearly a decade, and that recovery was still taking place.
Yeah, and there were places, downtown Santa Cruz, and a lot of places that looked earthquake devastated for quite a while. It took longer in some places than others, and so nobody was going to easily or soon forget that there had been a major earthquake, even for years. You're right.
Was there any reporting that you recall doing in the years that followed that because of that earthquake, things changed for the better, such as, building codes developed to make the area more earthquake resistant, something along those lines?
Yeah, and improvements in technology too, Chip. I mean, they
yeah.
made some big improvements in technology. There had been weaknesses in technical systems that made the communications even harder. They worked on that. That was one of their top priorities. And yes, of course, building codes, everything changed after that.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I was looking at Wire Copy a day or two ago. There are some tremors in Watsonville.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, and it just takes you right back to 1989. And if it does for me, you can imagine the people who lived through it, the worst of it. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, honestly, PTSD, post-traumatic stress from having lived through that. The one last nugget I just wanted to pull out very quickly, I honestly should have mentioned it previously, but was because that World Series was going on, and it was the Battle of the Bay, right? Baseball, what we were seeing there. There were so many people not on the roads at 504 that otherwise would have been. So if there's any kind of silver lining to this, it's that it could have been so much worse.
Yeah, and people said, either they had hustled home to watch or were hanging around somewhere to watch. And that saved probably a lot of lives. Yeah. And you're right, the Earthquake World Series, as they call it, but that saved lives, definitely.
Yeah. Well, Catherine, we really appreciate you taking the time to join us on this episode of We Witnessed and reliving your coverage and really the things that are still being talked about, probably still impacting the San Francisco area as a whole.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I'm glad you're doing this. As we were saying earlier, memories kind of fade. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a good thing you're talking about this.
Well, there we go. And we've certainly imprinted some new memories on viewers out there that learned about this for the first time from watching. And so we thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on the next episode of We Witnessed.